As we know, the Utah Jazz thrive off of using their main star, Lauri Markkanen, alongside Colin Sexton's recent resurgence into the starting lineup, as well as having a consistent scoring punch from that dynamic duo. In that same sense, you find a world where you wonder, do they end up keeping Lauri Markkanen in the long term? Admittedly, he is 26 years old, turning 27 by the end of this season, and while he does still have a lengthy career ahead of him, being that he is one of the best big man shooters in this league, you also wonder how much does Danny Ainge and that front office really appreciate having him, and do they think that they're going to be willing to trade him in the coming years if they don't feel comfortable with how they're looking on their contention timeline. Remember, they decided to go ahead and go into a rebuild stage where they felt like within a 5-year span, they would be capable of being a contending built roster. One thing that I found to be very interesting was an article from the Thunderous Intentions website where Josh Cornelison actually ended up detailing a possible trade for the Thunder, landing Lauri Markkanen in a blockbuster summer proposal for this upcoming 2024 offseason. I found this to be a little bit ridiculous, but upon reading into things, it did make a little bit of sense, but I don't know how realistic it is that this actually happens. Me personally, I would like to go ahead and state, I feel the most comfortable with keeping Lauri Markkanen. I love his game. For a star player to enjoy being in Utah, you can't say enough about it, because most of the time they have to draft their stars. There haven't been any phenomenal pieces that have chosen to come to Utah in years. So you'd much rather have a world where you have a bunch of stars that enjoy being there and just run out their days. And if you don't end up getting to the highest peak of the mountain, then you can say you just gave it your best effort. Welcome back to the channel. Go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. It's your boy Wraith Hoops, and let's go ahead and get into this one. Now, let's not forget, the Oklahoma City Thunder might possibly be the only team in the league with more draft capital than the Utah Jazz over the next 6 seasons. Specifically, they average roughly 3 second-round picks and 2 first-round picks over the next 7 seasons. That's 5 picks when teams are usually armed with just 2. Considering that as well, they also have a treasure trove of young talent that could also be used in a deal, so much so that they wouldn't actually have to end up trading away their big 3 in the Rising Stars situation. Chet Holmgren has actually come onto the scene and been a more so Kevin Durant-ish demigod type of player that has a lot of offensive upside and also is very competent on the defense side of the ball, despite him being a very lightweight player. At the same time, you have Gilgeous-Alexander and Jalen Williams being 2 very competent shot creators that also have the ability to play make for their teammates, more so Shea than J-Dub, but by and large them being very efficient and developing individually, which also ends up as a cast of 3, pushing this team to new heights so early on in their rebuild stage. The team has been predicated on the ability to have 0 holes on the defensive side of the ball, and it has worked wonders for them. With that understanding, it's very unlikely that they end up taking a player that ends up being a small guard or a defensive person that just doesn't have the greatest mindset on that side of the floor in favor of their own offensive game. Understanding this, it narrows down the number of candidates that they can add to their roster to make them even greater, because they are already a very solid team. Understanding that they've always been in the mix for one of the top seeds in the Western Conference this season, you believe that they will continue that trend in years to come. But how could that Thunder team get better? By picking up Lauri Markkanen. I previously stated that I obviously do not want to trade away Lauri Markkanen, but I do understand it is a very real possibility, being that Danny Ainge is the CEO with Justin Stanek as the general manager, and it just puts you in a situation to where if the price is right, they might be willing to make that deal. Now, the proposed deal in the article said that Josh Giddey, Cason Wallace, and Ousmane Dieng, along with 3 future first-round picks in exchange for Lauri Markkanen. Now, of course, the question would be, which first-round picks does it happen to be? Because if it does end up being the Oklahoma City Thunder's first-round picks, then they're not going to be worth the most amount, because they're going to be such a good team, it's basically going to turn into a second-rounder. But if it happens to be some of the other picks that they've ended up getting and amassing over these past couple seasons, then you could see a world where it does make some pretty decent sense to go ahead and make this deal. Josh Giddey obviously has a little bit more upside long term, though he is a decent passer and he's a decent scorer. He's never going to be a superstar caliber player. A solid role player that can definitely play some big minutes and is pretty playable on defense, but you don't expect him to end up leading your team individually to a championship. Similarly to Cason Wallace, he is a very solid player, and honestly in the last draft, he was the player alongside Taylor Hendricks that I thought the Jazz would have ended up targeting, so getting him would be nice if you are a Utah Jazz fan. In this article, he details that despite understanding that obviously Lauri Markkanen has expressed his desire to stay in Utah and have his family remain there for honestly the remainder of his career, the front office is going to do what's in the best interest of the team and what's going to put them in the position to look the best in the eyes of the remainder of the league, and also from a money-making business standpoint, because again, the NBA is a business. The author of the article then details that this particular package would seem to be a can't resist offer. He says specifically, the Jazz would get a buy low on Josh Giddey, who wouldn't be quite so far down the pecking order in Utah and could continue to develop. Cason Wallace is already proved to be a high-level two-way rotation guard, and Ousmane Dieng is a decent flyer. Now add in 3 first-round picks on top and you get an offer that might be enticing enough to get the Jazz to think twice. And I think ultimately that is the biggest one. The ultimate situation is that the Thunder obviously ended up being a very quick to rebound, quick to rebuild team. The Utah Jazz seem to be on a much lower pace, which is understandably so. And so he details that if the Jazz decide to capitalize on Markkanen and fully bottom out next season in a stronger draft before rebounding up in the standings, this type of deal could get them there. I personally don't enjoy the idea of doing so because I believe that the Utah Jazz aren't as far away from contending as a lot of people would like to think them to be. I do think that they have some very reliable young pieces that just need a couple more years of development, and I think in the next 3 seasons we could see a team that is very stand-up and very capable. By that time, of course, Lauri will be 29 going on 30, but if you think that's a genuine championship contender window, and you think that Lauri Markkanen is the guy that can stay on this roster and be a reliable scoring option and a viable defensive threat, then I think that you should keep him because he should still, in theory, be in his prime, because most players tend to fall in their prime at the age of 28 and usually exit around the age of 33, giving you a solid 3-year window to show what you are. Danny Ainge has been known to buy low and sell high and refuses to overpay for any particular player. A deal like this, as stated before, could end up enticing him at the very least into thinking about making it. Whether he makes it or not will ultimately come down to the owners and the rest of the front office decision as well, but I do think that it is liable to occur in the right circumstances. Understanding that next year's draft is going to be even better than this year's draft, and considering that the Utah Jazz aren't going to convey this year's draft pick, next season, if you end up bottoming out again, you end up having the opportunity to get an even better piece than you potentially could in this draft. I'm not a fan of tanking, I'm not a fan of losing games intentionally, though I am a fan of developing young talent. So playing guys in meaningful games will ultimately end up being the best way to see this team succeed going forward. And ultimately, I believe that Danny Ainge and Justin Zanuck will end up putting this team in the best waters for years to come, whether we like the immediate decisions similar to the ones that they made at this trade deadline or not. But you guys let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm always interested to see what you guys have to say. Would you guys feel comfortable tanking next season and possibly trading away Lauri Markkanen in this offseason if such a deal as the one previously described is left on the table for him? If not, do you even decide to trade Lauri Markkanen at all? Or would you like to keep him because he is a star that could be a legitimate number 2 or guaranteed bona fide number 3 on a championship contending team, and really just ride out the wave and see what you can do with him on your roster? My name is Wraith Hoops. Thanks for viewing this video. As always, go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on post notifications for more Utah Jazz content. Become a member to get the videos faster than anybody else and help support the channel. With that being said, good morning, good evening, and good night, no matter where you are on the globe watching. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.